Welcome to Qt Widgets and more. In today's episode, I will attack a problem that you likely have in your own application if you're using QProgressDialog. Namely that sometimes a QProgressDialog shows up while another QProgressDialog is already up and running. And that is super annoying because if you cancel the inner progress dialog, that doesn't mean that you cancel the outer. And sometimes it looks really weird. I'll create a class that is a progress dialog for a number of progress bars in this video. So let me show you exactly what I mean when I say progress bar coming up on top of each other. I have an example here and you can see that it's subconscious thinking already. That was actually part of it. Ooh, that was subconscious again. And maybe I can move this away so you can see underneath there is a thinking heart. So I have a loop where I'm running through a number of steps and thinking heart for each of those steps. But in those thinking heart step, it actually is calling upon another function where it also brings up a progress dialog. So why would I ever want to do that? Well, I want to bring up a progress dialog whenever something takes a long time so the user knows that, hey, something is going on here. Don't worry, it is actually working out just as it should. And hey, you can even cancel the operation if you want to. But if I have a function G that now has a progress bar, and I have a function F that is calling upon G, and F itself has a progress bar, then I may end up in this episode. But let's rewind a bit and look at what does a QProgressDialog dialog do. You certainly know that already, but let's just see if there is any minor things that you might not have thought out yourself. Let me just run the application so you can see a progress bar thinking hard while I'm thinking hard here to explain what is going on. I have a QProgressDialog. I set a title. There is a title for the cancel button. It has a number of steps from 0 to 100. Why start at, why specify 0? Wouldn't I always want to start at 0? Well, the Qt company thought, or Trolltech all the way back then, that sometimes you would want to have a different starting point. So that's an option. It's a minor annoyance to me really because I need to say, rather than just saying I have this amount of steps, I need to say I have this range. That's another way of specifying it. Then I do my progress. That's what I do in my for loop here. And I have a random generator where I go with a number of milliseconds from 0 to 100. That's what this one, that's the simulating work. I iterate here for 100 times. And if it was canceled, then I'll print canceled and return. Otherwise, I'll set the value to the new value here and I'll call process events. Okay. First of all, I don't think that I need to call process event myself. I think that the set value of the QProgressDialog does that. But I definitely need it on QProgressBar if I have one of these. That was the first thing. The second thing is that the progress dialog, let me just run it again here. There we are. It showed up right away in this example here. But it might not show up right away because it might come to the conclusion you are likely going to be done with this progress before a significant time have elapsed. And there's no reason to bother the user with, hey, oh, never mind, I'm already done. So therefore, it has a few heuristics built into it. First of all, it will bring it up if it has lasted more than 4 seconds. Second, it will bring it up if it concludes from the calculations of how many steps you've done that it will last more than 4 seconds. But it will not conclude that before at least 100 milliseconds has elapsed so that it doesn't come to any wrong conclusion based on a few very slow steps initially. Did I mention the 4 seconds? Well, that is actually one of those things that might bite you from time to time. If your progress dialog is really, or if your progress is taking a long time and the first step is going to take 10 minutes, then you're not going to get back to that event loop before those 10 minutes. And therefore, it will not be 4 seconds. It will be 10 minutes before you see a progress dialog. Okay. The The other catch, and I am actually talking about this in the Programming with Qt Widgets series that you can find on YouTube if you want to learn Qt Widget programming in more depth. The other catch is that you need to kickstart the evaluation, and you do so by calling setProgress0. So if you forget to call the setProgress0, then it doesn't get into the calculation, or I guess setProgress with the minimum value. Then it will not get, it will not start the elapsed timer from which it does its calculation. So do remember those two things. But I'm actually going to wrap all of those things for you in our example. But before we get there, let's go back and see the example of bringing up multiple progress dialogs, why we even could come to such an arrangement. So what you see here in step 2 is that I'm just calling f, and f is this loop that you saw before, and it has a progress dialog created here. It calls g, and g has a progress dialog up here for the subconscious thinking, and obviously there are 2 instances of QProgressDialog, so 2 dialogs will be shown on the screen. No surprise there, hopefully. That's where my solution gets into play. Let's first see what it looks like when it's executing. So here you see the progress bar updating 2 of them at the same time. The thinking hard at the top and then the subconscious thinking underneath. In this example, they are both visible at the same time, but sometimes, in my code at least, the subconscious thinking, there would simply be no progress bar down there. And I even have such a complex setup that sometimes I even have 3 progress bar underneath each other. And then it goes down to 2, maybe down to 1, sit there for a while, goes to 2, goes to 3, goes to 2, and so on. But the key thing in my code that you unfortunately did not see here is that my dialog will not shrink again. It originally did, and that was super annoying because when I wanted to cancel, I was fighting to hit the cancel button, but it was moving around on the screen when the dialogs shrunk. There's also just one cancel button in there, and that's because I do not want to be able to just cancel a sub-step. Either I do it all or I cancel it all. And that's the annoying part with the multiple progress dialog. If you hit cancel in one of the sub-thinking dialog coming up, then it would just go away, but you would then continue unless you did something very specific with the next one. Here, let me just run it again. Here I am canceling and the whole thing is canceled. In just a second, I will show you what the implementation looked like. But let's just look at what does the client side, the code using this class, what does that look like? It looks like this. I have a Qt Widgets and more progress dialog class here that has a static method add progress. There are 10 steps, no silliness of going from 0 to 10 or from 10 to 20. It has 10 steps and it's thinking hard. It's the title of that progress dialog. Then I do my progress calculation here. I do call process events, which again, I'm not sure whether I should have in there. Play with it yourself. We can see that when we look at the code. And if it was canceled, then I'll just return. I call G in here. Calling G is this step up here. Again, add progress. So it's the same static method, add progress. That is what adds the second progress bar to my dialog. I get a proxy object back here that feels like if it was a QProgress dialog. So it's basically just plug and replace. So in your code, you would write this line here, and then this is your progress dialog that you had already in your code. I am running 100 steps, subconscious thinking here. I am running through, and if I was canceled, I will return out. So now imagine I press cancel, it will return out here. It will be done. It will go up into the next iteration. Oh, I was canceled, returning out from that one too. Okay, let's go to the header file and look at what does the API of these 2 classes, namely the Qt Widgets and more progress dialog, which is just a subclass of Qt dialog, and the proxy object here, Qt Widgets and More Progress Proxy, which feels like if it was a QProgressDialog. It has the same API. To some degree, okay, kill me. First of all, add progress is a static method, as I said, number of steps, what is the title. It has a static bool, was cancelled. It has a close event, so if I go and press the close button on the progress dialog, then it will stop the progress too. It has this add progress private, just so that I can get to an instance of this object here. Maybe show, because I do not want to show right away. I want the same facility of 4 seconds, or at least assuming more than 4 seconds before I show it up. And I have a few other things in here. My Qt Widgets and More Progress Proxy object has a set value, just like QProgressDialog has a set value. It has an increase value, which is a facility I've always been missing on QProgressDialog, because if I didn't have the actual value myself, if I was just, I want to run through a list of whatever, and then I'll iterate through the list, and I still need to a counter for that. But hey, increase value will help me there. Set label text in case that the label text changes on the way. Was cancelled. Wait, Jesper, didn't you say the was cancelled was on the progress dialog itself? It is. This is just to make it easier. It'll just call the other one. I can explicit call destroy on it if I have a reason to destroy it from outside. And then I have a bit of information down here where I'm referring to some of the other widgets. The key thing here actually is that I have my M section as a unique pointer, so whenever this one goes out of scope, it will delete this one, which is how it notifies the progress dialog itself that, hey, I'm done with the calculation. Let's go and look at the add progress. So the add progress here gets an instance, add progress private. Okay, fair enough. Add progress private here. It will create a section. So my progress dialogs are sitting on top of each other in there. It creates a section, a label, a progress bar. So that's a label and progress bar next to each other that you'll put into a layout. If mLayout is equal to 0, that means that I'm actually the topmost progress bar. And that's a caveat in this code base here. If you are not deleting your progress bars in the same order as they appeared, then it will not work. It's relatively easy to fix, but at least in this code base here, my use case was the recursive progress bars. It might be that you have progress that comes from downloading stuff, and that one download might be faster than the other, and then they, of course, will not be deleted in the same order. But that's for you to fix. I set the range from 0 to steps. I set the value 0. Remember, I said you need to remember to do that for that thing to work. And I call layout here or I create a layout, put it into my label and my progress bar into the layout. I connect that whenever the section, that's the one I delete in the proxy, whenever that is destroyed, then I will check whether I am down to no more progress bars. And if that's the case, then I will delete myself and set myself to a null pointer. I will return a proxy object, stacked proxy object here. So Qt Widgets and More proxy object. I'll create that one because that one goes, as you saw it in the client code over here, it simply goes on the stack, and whenever it goes out of scope on the stack, it means it's done. I'll create my proxy object here, which looks like this. It takes the section, the label, and progress bar, and it remembers the section in here, but that one was a unique pointer, so now it will take ownership of that. Somewhat unusual way of using unique pointers, but hey, that's what it is. Set value, simply go and call maybe show, well, call progress bar set value. Maybe show is the one that tests whether I have now been executing for more than 4 seconds with my estimate, and lots of stuff here, and call shows if that is the case. Otherwise, it call process events. Oh, I was right. I do not need to call process event in my client code. My bad. I'm going to re-record this whole episode just for that fix, you will fix that in your brain. Increase value, just go and ask for the value from the progress bar. Add one value, go to the progress bar, add one. Set label text, go to the label, set the text. So there's not much magic going on in here. The final part in all of this is my QProgress or Qt Widgets and more progress dialog, which is a subclass of QDialog. It sets up the window modality to block the whole application. You might want to make that customizable in your code. It is creating the layout here and connect that the cancel button should go into setting the instance variable m_cancelled, which is what was cancelled is reading. And finally, it starts this timer here, and this timer will go off after default show time, which is 4 seconds. So I have a timer going off after 4 seconds. I admit it's likely not very useful in its own, because if you do not get back to telling the progress dialog, hey, I have done another step, that's likely because you are deep thinking about something that will make the event loop not run around. But I wanted it to be as close to QProgressDialog itself as it could be. And that's it. As I said, this is more or less a plug and play. Just put it in your source code wherever you have a progress dialog. Again, step 3. Usually it would say QProgressDialog, my dialog, and then it would do whatever. Now you simply have this auto progress dialog and then add progress. You work with this instance here as if it had been a QProgressDialog, simply because the API matches. You can find the source code in the link description below. And I think this is about time where I tell you to subscribe and like and give us feedback and all of those things that you know very well by now. I hope you enjoyed this episode. It was not rocket science, but on the other hand, it's one of those tiny little things that just sometimes annoys you and where you just need that little push to fix it. My code base is now 11 years old. It has been bothering me from day one that I would see progress dialog on top of progress dialogs on top of progress dialogs. But my program is an in-house one with only KDAP people being users, so not really worthwhile fixing. But then again, one day it just annoyed me so much that I created this, and hopefully it'll be useful for you in your application. Thank you for watching, and until next time, have a great time.